Welcome to the Hockey Writers WhatsKraken, a weekly show with our top Seattle Kraken writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from the first ever puck drop to their future rivalries, our team covers everything that happens with the Kraken. So sit back, relax, and get ready to find out what's cracking.
Welcome to the THW WhatsKraken show, hosted by me, Tom Pepper, Sean Raggio, and Adam Kierszenblat. Presented by the Hockey Writers, we talk Seattle Kraken hockey every week on iHeartRadio, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to check out our written work at thehockeywriters.com and follow the show on Twitter at WhatsKraken Show, as well as at Raggio9124 and at Adam Kierszenblat. So it's been quite an interesting week in hockey, so we've got a few things to talk about. This is our 20th episode, and we are very happy to have on one of our few guests that we've had on the show, Colin Newby. He's a Philadelphia Flyers writer at the Hockey Writers, so we're extremely excited to have you on. How are you doing, Colin?
Doing great. Excited to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. All right, how have your weeks been, guys? Sean, how are you doing? How was Christmas?
I'm doing all right. Christmas was great. I got this awesome Kraken sweater. It's like almost like a sweatshirt jersey from, my Aunt Donna, Uncle Augie, and cousins Nick and Gina all got it for me. And it's just, I'm loving it.
That's nice.
It was great seeing some family. Got to see my girlfriend, meet some of her family too, and they were all incredibly awesome. So it was a good Christmas this year. Looking forward to the new year. How about you, Tom? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm up in Quebec at the cottage right now. As you see, my background's not totally normal. I've got it hanging off of a ceiling lamp on this side, and then a curtain hanger on this side. So hopefully it'll stay up for the rest of the show. But I've been having a good time. I've been playing lots of pond hockey and just spending time with my family and trying to get through these crazy times. How have you been, Adam?
I've been good. Wasn't here last week. Been working a bit. We're in work calls. Sometimes you can't jump on the call, especially when you guys live on the East Coast. So when we record, it's nighttime. For me, unfortunately, it's the middle of the day. So sometimes it happens, but yeah, it's been what it is. Colin, how you doing?
Doing well. Just trying to hang in like everybody else is. It's been one of the wildest weeks I can remember, but looking forward to seeing some hockey again, of course.
Yes, it looks like Flyers and Kraken are on for tomorrow night as of right now. So we can begin talking and we can actually get excited about this Kraken Flyers matchup. So the first topic we're going to discuss today is obviously you've been covering the Flyers for a while. And Dave Hakstol was a guy that was there a few years ago. He was there from 2015 to 2018. Went off and was an assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then was named the first head coach in Seattle Kraken history. Obviously, the Kraken have been struggling a bit this season. Not necessarily Dave Hakstol's fault, but I just want to get your opinion of at least his time with the Flyers. What did you think of him during his time in Philadelphia?
I was excited when Hakstol came in back in 2015. That was a little bit of an outside-the-box hire for the Flyers. He replaced Craig Berube, who was a former Flyer and also the all-time leader in NHL history in fighting majors. And the Flyers were under a lot of criticism at that point of trying to hang on to the Broad Street bullies and only hiring their own people and kind of a stuck in the Stone Age type of mentality. So Hakstol was a total change up from that, coming in from the college ranks and a first-time NHL head coach. He was there for 3.5 seasons in what the Flyers called the competitive rebuild, which really just resulted in Claude Giroux and, to an extent, Jacob Voracek carrying the team on the playoff bubble for 3.5 seasons. In Hakstol's first year, they made a real exciting push to the playoffs. Shane Gostisbehere, that was his rookie year. He went on a tear, kind of carried the Flyers in. So there were some big moments. He ended up making the playoffs in 2 out of his 3 seasons and then was let go about midway through his 4th season. At that point, although I didn't really think it was fully his fault, he wasn't the problem in Philadelphia. He certainly wasn't the solution when the Flyers went in the tank early in the 18-19 season that was, but he certainly didn't have the best rosters to work with in Philadelphia. A lot of Flyers fans would probably disagree with my defense of Hakstol. He went under a lot of criticism for relying too heavily on veterans, especially when he was in Philadelphia. And also, it just seemed like he got in a bad way because the cameras would flash to him every time they let up a goal. And he would sit with a stern look on his face, and his expression would barely change. So that frustrated a lot of people and a frustrating era of Flyers hockey. But ultimately, I'd say there was a lot of ups, a lot of downs in the Hakstol era.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to the point you mentioned. He came up from the NCAA, and just before the show, I was taking down some notes, and he was actually the first head coach to go from the NCAA straight to an NHL head coaching job since 1982. So it was obviously a very significant signing for the Flyers. Didn't end up lasting too long, but I mean, like you mentioned, he did have some success. He made it to the playoffs a couple of times. And, like we saw some good things from Dave Hakstol, and obviously earned him that assistant coaching job in Toronto and then eventually with the Kraken. So I'll go to you next, Adam, with this question. How do you think Dave Hakstol's done through the first little bit of the season here with the Kraken? What do you think of it?
Well, I think I've made my point about Dave Hakstol pretty clear on our show multiple times that I don't think that he is the right coach for this organization as of right now. Some of the similar trends have kind of appeared that did in Philadelphia, where it doesn't seem like I know the team is good, but it doesn't seem like he can bring the team together. He's relying heavily on the veterans. Like Colin said, we're not seeing a lot of guys like Alex True or guys like Hayden Fleury, players that are young and that should be getting an opportunity with this team being so far out of the playoff picture that they are right now. So I think that it's bringing a little bit of what happened in Philadelphia with the reliance on the veterans. And the record has shown that you need to have that youth integration in there. You can't be having, at this point of his career, you can't be having Mark Giordano play 25 minutes a game. You need that push from the young guys. I know Vince Dunn has done well. He's a young guy, but like their first line of Schwartz and Eberle, those are guys in their around their 30s. Like they're not really given, in my opinion, they're not really giving that next group of players, a younger group of players, the opportunity in Seattle under Hakstol.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that we've mentioned many times in the show now is just the Kraken's identity. It feels like they're still trying to build an identity. And, we kind of thought they had it at the beginning, where they were a very tough team to play against. They were a very hard forechecking team. They were very physical. And over the last 10 games or so, we've seen them completely depart from that. And, they're hitting a lot less. They're getting out hit every game. And it just doesn't look like the same team we saw earlier in the season. So I don't know if this is a coaching issue or something with the players have just lost some sort of mojo or something, but this team does look different and they look a lot less inspired than they did at the beginning of the season, in my opinion. So I'll go to you next, Sean. What are your thoughts on Dave Hakstol?
Well, I just want to touch upon your identity point, and I feel like they know what their identity should be, but they're having trouble sticking to it, and I think that has to do with a lack of confidence. When they're on, they can tangibly see it. Whether they're getting shots on, they're playing physical, they're using that physicality to score. But when they're off, I think that their confidence is just taking too big of a hit. And another thing with Hakstol, I've harped on a bit, it's just mismanaging the goaltending. I know it's hard when Driedger was out with injury multiple times throughout the year, but you got to figure something out. I'm sure. I mean, I mentioned it before. You could have offer sheet, claim Matt Murray off of waivers. You have the cap space to it. At the very least, if it doesn't work out, just send him back on waivers and someone else can take him. Or, Decord still with the AHL, he could maybe mentor him. You did win a couple Stanley Cups. I think that it's a lot of mismanaging. Adam was talking about Alex True, and if you're going to give Alex True 6 to 10 minutes a game, I'm perfectly fine having him tear up the AHL on the first line, because you're not going to give him that time with the top six. But it's at a point, like you said, maybe you want to start giving him those shifts with the top six because you're not really looking like you're a playoff team, and especially with the upcoming inconsistencies across the NHL. Who knows who's going to get on a run when you might have games canceled or postponed, left and right, whether it's COVID issues with your team respectively or your opponent.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned just players, for example, the goaltending situation and players that are in and out of the lineup, and just, yeah, like it does seem like this team's being mismanaged a bit, and just Hayden Fleury in and out of the lineup, and all these guys who seem like they have potential to be full-time NHLers, and they just aren't getting that opportunity. And that, in my opinion, is definitely going to damage their confidence. I mean, there's young guys on this team that deserve a shot, and it seems like they're doing what they need to do to earn that shot, and then they're getting benched for a game. So I don't know if that's, they're in on that, or if that's fully on Dave Hakstol, but there's a lot of lineup mixing.
And is that shot really 8-9 minutes a game? I remember Ryan Donato was healthy scratched. I think it was in the home opener, and next game out scores a goal. And if I recall, up until this last break, he was still getting fourth line minutes. And he was scoring too. I think he had goals in 3 straight.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's you're showing that you deserve more ice time. Maybe you can't think of a way to bump someone else down. Well, if you can't bump one player down, maybe shuffle up the lines a little bit because you're not winning anyway. Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe instead of making one little change, at this point, try something new completely. You have one line that works, and we might touch on this later. It was Tanev, Geeky, and McCann. Keep that line. I talked about how we don't have, in my head, there's no set in stone first line based on depth chart, right? Your first line could be listed as your third line, which it essentially was. So you can't, as we said, you can't be rewarding players by giving them less ice time. You reward them by putting them in the lineup and you give them 8 minutes a game. That's not going to do anything for them. They get a goal, good. You let them build on it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are still kids, relatively.
Yeah.
24.
And I mean, this leads us perfectly into our next topic of just, well, I mean, you brought up Tanev there in the Tanev line and what we were seeing in that success. And we've, if you've been living under a rock, Brandon Tanev is missing the rest of the season with an ACL injury suffered against the Oilers on December 18th. So, I mean, that's a huge bummer for Kraken fans. He really captured the heart of everyone in Seattle, and he's going to especially be missed in this lineup. There you go. We got the Tanev shirt out. He is really going to be missed. He was the biggest hitter on the team. Every single shift he was noticeable. He was always giving his all, and like we've said many times, he was like the spiritual leader of this team. So that is a huge loss for the Kraken, which, as I was saying before, leads us into our next point. Could the Kraken be considering a trade at some point? Do they want to stay in this playoff race? And of course, we have Colin here, and another team that's looking to keep up in the playoff race, currently 6th in the Metropolitan Division, is the Philadelphia Flyers. So we wanted to have a little bit of fun here and consider some options. Could the Kraken and the Flyers be potential trade partners? Is there anyone either team would want from the other team? So I'll go to you first, Colin. From your perspective of the Kraken, is there anyone you think could help out the Flyers lineup right now?
Well, I see the Flyers most likely as sellers at the deadline. There was a lot of opportunity for these two teams to maneuver over the summer. The Flyers are one of the more interesting teams going into the expansion draft. At this point, I think that maneuvering is probably off the table. I mean, the Flyers would certainly love to get their hands on a Vince Dunn or maybe even a Hayden Fleury, but I don't know if there's many plausible scenarios where that'll actually pan out. Over the summer, I would have told you that Jamie Alexiak or maybe Adam Larson would be very good fits with the Flyers. They were looking for veterans. They were looking for physical players. But that's almost out the window right now because of how the Flyers started. A lot of people are talking about the possibility of a rebuild, and I don't think they're looking to acquire many veterans right now. They probably are looking to unload a few. Fits for the Kraken, I don't know as much about. Claude Giroux could potentially be on the trading block. That's a deeper issue, but he is on the last year of his contract, so he will be shopped around, most likely a little bit entering the trade deadline season in early March. Other options are Cam Atkinson and Rasmus Ristolainen. If they'd be a fit for the Kraken, probably Ristolainen more likely.
I had Ristolainen written down in my notes here because with Tanev obviously out now for the Kraken the rest of the season, who's going to be their heavy hitter? They have Alexiak, and that's about it. So if they're looking for someone to hit, I mean, Ristolainen's got to be the go-to guy from the Flyers. But I'll go to you next, Sean. What do you think the Kraken could use from the Flyers if there was a potential trade here?
Well, first off, we're going to make this a little interactive for those viewing it online. Sell for assets. At this point, I think they have to look to the future and ask themselves, who do we want to be next year? Because, yes, it is still relatively early, but at this point, it might be smarter to do that. I don't necessarily think I want Ristolainen if I was Ron Francis because there's already a logjam of defenders. And yes, so you got that 3-4 defenders cycling in and out of the lineup, assuming the lineup was healthy. But to me, Atkinson would be a very attractive piece because you need goal scoring because aside from one or two players, you're not really getting that goal scoring that you need. Points totals might be up, but you need tangible goals going to the back of the net. Mm-hmm. Now, that would require probably the moving of someone like a Vince Dunn or a Hayden Fleury. And depending on if there were picks involved would influence my thoughts on that. But if you're not getting that goal score, and I'm not too sure what his contract looks like, but if you're not going to get someone who will immediately, even if it's not going to take you to the playoffs, immediately impact the team in a good way, you should be getting assets back right now. And as one final point, it totally escaped me. So I'll raise my hand if I remember. Always happens.
And another thing that a lot of people might forget is that this team has a lot of cap space right now, and there is a big free agency coming up in the offseason. So as we even said before this team was even took the ice for their first game, that this first season is pretty much almost a test run if things didn't go to plan, and things aren't really going to plan right now. They're sitting near the bottom of the league. So is there really need to panic, or can the Kraken really pull this off? And like you mentioned, maybe trade off some of these one-year deals at the trade deadline for assets and, go big in free agency. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah. And I just remembered really quick, part of the thing you talked about with Ristolainen was hitting. And yes, you're going to lose that with Tanev, but still, if only one or two guys are hitting, you don't really need to add another one guy because you're not getting anything from the team as a whole. It's great if those guys are leading the way, but they're leading and no one's following. And I think that could revert back to our previous conversation about confidence too. So in that case, you're not really losing much by losing a guy in the lineup who's going to throw the body if the team as a whole isn't going to commit to that type of play. So at that point, it's like, do you value that area of the game more than something like goal scoring? And if you're the Kraken, I do not think you should.
All right, I'll hand it over to you now, Adam, and get your say on this. What do you think? Should the Kraken be making a trade to try to get into the playoffs here, or do you think this should just be trying to get assets for the future?
Well, I do think that if they are going to make trades, that they should go with the younger players. But speaking specifically with the Philadelphia Flyers, the Flyers power play has not been very good this year. They've had injuries, so that does have a part of it. But a guy like Kelly Yarncroke could really make a difference for the Flyers. He's a UFA at the end of the year. So if you bring him in, before the trade deadline, you have a little bit of runway to see if he's going to work in that organization or not before you decide if you're going to sign him or not. And one guy that I would love to see come back to Seattle is Morgan Frost. He was incredible for Team Canada in 2018, 2019, or the 2019 World Juniors. He was great for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds back in the OHL. This is a guy who put up over 100 points in his final year of junior. For whatever reason, Morgan Frost hasn't been given that opportunity with the Flyers organization. He's averaged less than 14 minutes a game every season for the last 3 seasons. He's only played about 30 games in total. So if there was a way to, maybe send Carly Yarncroke over to the Flyers and Morgan Frost somehow comes back to the Seattle Kraken, I feel like that would be good because it would give both players an opportunity to kind of, restart in new organizations. Both players are kind of struggling. And it just seems like Morgan Frost isn't getting that opportunity in Philadelphia, regardless of injuries. I know he was on COVID protocol and just got off of it, but that's a guy that I have liked since junior, and I would love to see him on the West Coast, and basically out of Philadelphia.
I just want to say really quick, to just counter my own point about Cam Atkinson, because that was on a business level, on a human level. Atkinson went to school. He played in college with Jimmy Hayes. They brought in Keith Yandel, who, very close with the Hayeses, Kevin Hayes. And on a human level, aside from the fact that he's a great goal scorer and the Flyers would love to have him, I would want that right now. Me as a person, not as looking as a GM, I would want to keep that connection in there to kind of help Kevin through, what's going on right now with the loss of Jimmy.
Sure, and it's been funny throughout Hayes' entire tenure, really, but especially more recently. Every time the media gets a hold of something with Hayes, he's always joking around about the bromances with those guys, with Atkinson and Yandel. Patrick Brown is a fourth line forward that he also grew up with and played with up in the New England area. So those ties run very deep with the Flyers right now.
Yeah,
So,
Adam?
Sorry, Colin, before we jump in, I did mention Morgan Frost. Can you tell me why the Flyers just refused to develop him in any substantial way?
It's just been a very weird situation with Morgan Frost, and it's continued over about 3 years now. In the 2019-2020 season, he came up and he had some flashes at the beginning, but I think it was better. It was the right decision to send him back to the AHL ultimately, and he did not stay off for the playoff run. He went to the bubble with the team, but he didn't get much time. And then they came back last season and he got hurt in his first game in the NHL. Was out for the season. His rehab, that was the tricky part. The Flyers really wanted him to spend the offseason in Philadelphia and go through the training at their facilities, have everybody keep an eye on his development. And he elected not to do that himself. A lot of people said that played into the decision to keep him in the AHL to start this year. But after some injuries hit, after the COVID started to hit, Frost came up. He played pretty well in his first, I want to say 10 or so games. And like you mentioned, he went into COVID protocol, hurting his momentum again. So it's just been one of those odd scenarios where you're right. He's never really gotten going. He has showed the flashes like you talked about. He was a 100-point player in the OHL, and he's never really gotten to that level. He still has the talent. We'll see how he develops in whatever scenery he's in, whether he stays with the Flyers or whether he does end up moving to another team.
Good stuff. Yeah. All right, let's jump into our final topic of the day here. So we're going to preview the Kraken versus the Flyers, which as of right now, as we're recording this, is still going on. So fingers crossed by the time you're listening to this, it's still happening and we aren't just talking for no reason. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were saying something.
I said knock on wood. I'm very superstitious, as so many people in the hockey world are.
Yeah, everything's really confusing right now. You really don't know if any game, even the games tonight, I don't even know if we're going to end up happening. It's really, everything's up in the air right now. But, right as of right now, Kraken and Flyers is on, so let's preview it. I'll go to you first, Colin. The Flyers are currently 6th in their division. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. And I mean, both of these teams, Flyers and Kraken, are coming off COVID/holiday break. They went to break a bit earlier than they were supposed to. And this could maybe be a time for both teams to turn things around and maybe make a push for the playoffs. So what are you expecting to see from the Flyers after this break coming out against the Kraken?
Well, the Flyers are at a bit of a crossroad right now. They went on the 10-game losing streak Fired Elaine Vigneault 8 games into it. That was early December. They have won 4 of their last 5. They're 4-0-1, but they beat up on some bad opponents in there. They beat Ottawa. They had Arizona in that stretch. So they've turned a little bit of a corner. Obviously, it's better than a 10-game losing streak. But against better competition, I'd like to see how they develop now that the holiday break's behind them. COVID's going to slow everything down. Every team's going to have changeable parts in their lineup. And it's just something that all NHL teams are going to have to deal with over the next couple of months. But for the Flyers, I think that the next 2 months especially will decide what they do at the trade deadline and really the direction of the franchise moving forward after the Elaine Vigneault experiment didn't really work out. I mentioned Giroux earlier. He's one of the biggest question marks, but really the question is whether to rebuild or whether to continue to chase a Stanley Cup with some of the veteran players on the roster.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'll extend the exact same question to you, Adam, but this time for the Kraken. What are you looking for from the Kraken here after this break? How do you think they could maybe regroup and maybe make a push for the playoffs?
Well, I think that this game, if they have any hope of actually making the playoffs, which at this point, it's like you're going to have to play close to 800 hockey in order to make it in the playoffs. This game is going to be really telling because they've had the layoff. They were supposed to play on Monday night. That got scratched versus Vancouver. So is it going to be the exact same Seattle Kraken, or are we finally going to see them start to play, this 2-1 type of hockey that we expected at the beginning of the season? Is either Chris Driedger, Philip Grubauer going to step up? So I think that this game is very important because not only for the Flyers, who, they're still in that playoff race because their division is so tight. 6th place doesn't really mean much at the moment. They had a bad stretch, but we've seen in the past, you can, in that division, it's so tight down to the wire that you can make up that ground. In the Pacific, it's a little bit different this year. But we'll see, like, who's going to step up. Are they going to, is this going to be a game, that we sit down and we watch and we think, what was the point of watching this game? Is there going to be energy to that game? This is an extended break. Players have been off for over close to 2 weeks. I think like close around there, 1 to 2 weeks. So I think that this is an important game, not for the fact that, Seattle might go on this, St. Louis type run and make the playoffs, which I don't think is going to happen at this point, but more like, can they start to establish that they're a tough team to play against? Can the goaltending kind of figure itself out? And then also, like, for players like Ryan Donato, players like Kelly Yarncroke, Marcus Johansson, these guys who have contracts up at the end of the year, can they start improving their value so that the Kraken can get something back for them at the trade deadline? Or in Ryan Donato's case, Kraken should re-sign him. So there's a lot of questions around this Kraken team, and this Philadelphia test is a perfect opportunity right out of the bat to show if they are going to play like they did in the first part of the season and not live up to expectations, or are they going to start showing this the identity that's been missing, and that they can be a tough team to play against.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to remember, of course, we talked about Tanev is gone for the rest of the season, and he was a huge part of this team. And also the fact that this COVID's not going away. It just is affecting almost every team in the league right now. And I mean, we just saw yesterday, Mason Appleton went on COVID protocols. And then the day before that was Vince Dunn and Ryan Donato. So I think this is just going to keep happening for a while now. So for the Kraken to really get something going and really establish an identity, everyone's going to have to buy into the same goals and the same vision. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all works, especially with, I mean, the NHL is now implementing taxi squad systems again. So we're probably going to see more guys like Alex True and Cole Lind get more opportunities now. And, this could be a great opportunity for some of the young Kraken players who are trying to prove themselves that they want to be in this organization long term and that they have a spot in Seattle. So I mean, you can look at the positives like that, but the rest of the season is going to be a struggle for the Kraken, I think, especially just considering all the things going on right now. But hey, every team's going to have issues with this, so we'll see. I'll ask you now, Sean. So with Tanev out and obviously COVID issues and all this, who are you looking to like step up here and give the Kraken a chance?
Oof. Wow. That's a tough question, because really who's really stepped up consistently? Who's been the guy? We've had guys step up where you might not have expected it and then gone on little runs. It's going to be, for me, either Yanni Gourde or Jared McCann. I think that they've been two of their better players, even if, if I recall, I don't think Gourde's numbers specifically show it. But to me, Gourde might be taking, and I might be writing about this soon. That's me claiming the idea. But Gourde might be taking the torch as the emotional leader of this team now that Tanev is out. It will be interesting. We're recording this around 7 on Tuesday, the next 24 hours or so, to see what's going to happen. We brought on producer Matthew last episode to preview the game against the Canucks, and it was canceled. So let's hope that the Hockey Writers WhatsKraken isn't a jinx on the games, playing the games. But I think that it would have to be Gourde or Jared McCann. And just as a side note, if we were playing in no COVID, nothing happened, this was just another day in the season, I would be more scared of the Flyers than the Kraken, even with the records as they stand. But this is such a crapshoot now, because both teams have been off. Both teams are being hit different ways by COVID. I could tell you that I think that, especially due to the overplaying of someone like Philip Grubauer, I have Flyers goaltending. I could see a bit of an argument for the back end, but I would also have Flyers scoring, if assuming everything was healthy. But coming out like this, everyone's going to be, well, I don't want to say fresh, because who knows who is feeling what at this point, but it's definitely going to be a lot harder to just predict the outcome of this than if the season was going normally. I'm not necessarily a betting man. I would stay away from this game if I was a betting man.
One thing I didn't mention also, Carter Hart is in COVID protocol. So Martin Jones is likely to be the starter tomorrow.
That makes things interesting. Yeah. But I really harp on this workload and how much Grubauer is having to play. And I do think that, especially for the goaltending position, that's going to, if it hasn't already, that's going to have a very inverse impact on his game.
I think everyone, pretty much all the players, I mean, at least I am looking at this at almost like a completely fresh start to the season here. I mean, the whole beginning of the season was going totally normal and everything was going to plan. And now it just feels like we've completely reverted to what we were back at last season with all these COVID issues, and it's really just hit out of nowhere. So there's a lot of uncertainties with not just the Kraken, not just the Flyers, everyone's roster right now. And, we can only hope everyone's healthy and everyone stays safe, and that hopefully this passes eventually and we can get back to playing normal hockey, because things are getting pretty complicated right now. I mean, not only in the NHL, but in the World Juniors, Team USA had to forfeit today with 2 players testing positive. So this is not good for anyone. It's not good for the players, not good for the fans. We're just gonna have to get through this all, I guess.
Yeah, we're speaking to the fans too with that. We hope you stay safe, do what you gotta do, and be good to those frontline healthcare workers, because they are going so much work. I've got friends in it. Just if God forbid you have to go and see one of them, just make sure you say an extra thank you for them.
For sure.
They're doing great work. God's word.
All right. Before we wrap it up, anyone got any last words they want to say?
I wanted to ask Colin. All right, Colin, really quick. With the Flyers, 11th in the NHL in goals against with 92, 27th in the NHL in goals for with 77. At the trade deadline, are you targeting something to lower that goals against or raise the goals for, if you had to choose one?
Like I said, I think they'll lean more towards selling, but if I had to choose, I'd say goal scoring. Their defense has been a little better this year. The off-season additions were intended to correct the defense because they allowed more goals than any team in the NHL last season. That's something they wanted to clean up. To this point, that certainly hasn't been the problem with this team. To simplify it, I'd put it that way, and I'd say goal scoring has been a bigger issue.
And I can attest the Rangers definitely put a few past them. I enjoyed watching those games. I'm sorry.
St. Patrick's Day Massacre, we called it in Philadelphia, 9-0.
Called it another night in the office. Oh man, thank you for coming.
All right.
It's been great.
We'll wrap it up here. Everyone who's listening, enjoy the World Juniors while they're still on here. I'm gonna go watch Team Canada and Austria. Hopefully that's a good game. Yeah, just enjoy hockey. Whatever hockey you can get right now, take it in, because who knows what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of THW What's Kraken. We hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to next week as we'll be breaking down any Seattle Kraken news and rumors that come up over the next few days. Again, make sure to check out our written work at thehockeywriters.com and follow the show on Twitter at WhatsKraken Show, as well as at Raggio9124 and at Adam Kierszenblat. From Tom, Sean, and Adam, this has been THW What's Kraken.